Tonight, we're going to kick the episode off by understanding and discussing game theory behind X-Wing. What I wanted to do is create kind of a series where we talk a little bit about game theory, how it applies, and kind of understand all the little itty bitty pieces that go into it, right? And then at the end of every episode, take some of what we've learned and apply it to some mechanic within X-Wing. Tonight, for the series inauguration, we're going to be discussing a little bit about chess strategy and how it applies to X-Wing in particular with pilots, ships, and upgrades that are associated with it. And we're going to try to associate it with a specific chess piece, right? And the reason I picked this, right, is because to me, understanding what makes your ship special, right, or how it works inside of a list brings you closer to winning different games, brings you closer to having fun, right? And allows you to help teach other players, the inner mechanics of how X-Wing works. And the reason we kind of wanted to do this is because I want to have a series where we talk about list building, turn zero strategy, obstacle placement, objective placement, maneuvering, preparation for attacks, like an initial engagement, sustaining your health throughout the game, and then how do you close a game out, right? And I felt there's no real good way to do this other than to actually sit down and kind of talk through the different mechanics. So if I was working on teaching somebody, game theory, in terms of chess, right? So I want to teach you, how does chess work? What are the different theories behind it? They're going to teach you what are opening moves. They're going to teach you about mid game. They're going to teach you about end game, right? And anybody that's watched the Queen's Gambit probably has a little bit of understanding without even having to study chess theory. And I'll be honest, last year when I watched that, I did not know chess theory was a thing. And I found out it's a thing. So, X-Wing's a little bit different, right? We do have, maneuvering. We do have dice variance, which is a thing. But I feel that you can boil X-Wing down and remove some variance pieces of it to create as much of a fine-tuned experience for yourself to win as possible, right? So tonight, that's what we're going to do is we're going to cover and we're going to be having a conversation about how different ships and pilots become chess pieces. And then we're going to also talk about what happens when you start adding upgrades to them. Do they become more? Do they become less? How does that all work? All right. Anyway, so we wanted for our main segment was to have a conversation a little bit about chess theory and the chess theory origins, right? So if we talk about chess theory has been going on since, I don't know, I'm going to just say 1500s, right? I think that's a good guess that at least that's at the current time it started getting documented about it. And essentially, the way chess theory works is it gets broken down into essentially 3 different types of strategies. And then each of those strategies has different tactics that kind of flow in between them. So you have your opening maneuver. Your second strategy is your middle game. And then you have your end game. Which, okay, that all sounds good and fine. That sounds logical, kind of plain, simple, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things that when I came from Star Wars Destiny was there was a strategy, there was a theory to how you build your decks and what your decks do. Kind of the same with like Magic the Gathering. You have burn decks, you have commander decks, which everybody seems to love, monster decks, all these different styles of decks and how they interact with other decks across the table from them. In X-Wing, we have a little bit more uniqueness, more closer to what chess is, right? Every chess piece has a set maneuver and can only do that type of maneuver. In X-Wing, we have these ships that can do set maneuvers. And then they can do fancy maneuvers based on, their abilities and taking stress and all these other things. So I thought, well, chess and X-Wing seem pretty similar, right? They logically, you can make the connect between the two. And I started doing research about 8-9 months ago when Queen's Gambit came out on chess theory, just because I found it interesting. I love that show. I thought that show was great. And I really wanted to get into chess theory and say, hey, maybe I should play competitive chess. I have since found that I don't feel the ability to spend my dedicated time playing chess. I don't find it as fun as I find X-Wing. So I'm not going to do that. But the theories still apply. And so if we go through and we kind of talk about, well, there's different ways to construct the different phases inside of these different tactics, right? And you talk about opening knowledge. You could talk about tactics or combinations. You could talk about position analysis. You could talk about long-term plans, long-term goals that you have, and then your basic mate strategies. And that doesn't mean the dirty mating piece of it. It actually means how do you capture and conquer the king. So then I sat down and said, okay, well, if we think about X-Wing, we have what's called like churn 0, right? Churn 0 is essentially the way to kind of maximize your hypothetical and potential probability to win a game. It is not going to guarantee you the game, but it will increase your statistical probability of how you win the game. And if you go through chess theory, it's very similar. There's hundreds of different opening maneuvers, right, that you can do, and they all have different fancy names. And we're not going to get into every chess opening maneuver. Don't worry. This is not a chess podcast. In case I've lost anybody so far. Sorry, this is nerdy, geeky shit. I get really into this stuff. And like the last podcast I used to have was like a political one where I could get into like statistics and super detailed analysis. So now that I'm doing X-Wing, I have to like merge my two loves and like somehow put them together. And I love statistics. Anyway, so your 0 churn is kind of where you can maximize where your engagement is. And it's kind of the same way in chess. Like when you start out, your opening engagement, how you present yourself, where you want to maneuver, decides your base strategy. And while I sat there and thought about that, I really wanted to get into churn 0. But then I felt that it seemed a little silly, right? Because churn 0 talks about setting up objectives, right? Where do you want to place them? It talks about where do you place your scenario markers? Where are you going to fly your ships? How do you know where you're going to put them? And then where is your ship placement going to be? Plus your opening 2 to 3 churn maneuvers, right? And so then I sat there and said, okay, well, that's all good and fine. And churn 0 is super important. But what we have to do is take a step back and look at the pieces that are on the board. And if we talk about list building, which we did, I think 3 weeks ago, we talked a little bit about list building, and I feel like we didn't do a good service to it in the long run, only because of the fact that when we talk about these things, we didn't actually look at all the different pieces in the chess game, right? We didn't look at all the different pieces or ships, how they interacted, how they maneuvered, what happens when you give them upgrades and all of that. So I said tonight, what I really wanted to do was understand how all the pieces work and how they benefited, how they can be used in churn 0, and kind of start assigning different pieces that we can put on the table to what chess pieces are. So what we're going to do is JJ's going to bring up, and he's going to bring up our lovely cards. I think that's what you're going to do, JJ? Yes. I think that's what you're going to do.
Let's do it.
And I'm going to switch our screen. That way you can see the cards that we have. So can you bring up a Vulture droid? Bring up the base Trade Federation drone, and then bring me up a Holocron droid, please. And we're going to start by defining each of the different chess pieces. So the first chess piece that should come to everybody's mind, right, is the fact that you have a pawn. And I'm okay if we want to actually pick a pawn out of every one of the factions. I'm okay with that too. Now, I don't think every faction has pawns, but I do believe that they're probably there, right? Can I request less Roger Rogers? Nabi, you can absolutely, but I think that's silly though, right? And so we're gonna talk through that. The other thing I want to point out real quick, and I know I've been talking a lot and I haven't given anybody else an opportunity, a lot, but what I want to do is bring up the fact that, like, kind of like what Nabi says, right? So Nabi, holy crap, those cards are huge, JJ, by the way.
Yeah.
So what Nabi was saying is the pure fact that what we have is you can have different pieces to create a chessboard. And that's why X-Wing is so amazing, right? Is because you don't have to put pawns in your list. That's really small now. Can you make it bigger? You don't have to put just pawns in your list. You don't have to put 8 pawns in your list, right? That's the idea. Thank you. That's good. So you're killing me with that A-wing there.
It's all for Nabi, man. It's all for Nabi.
So the idea, though, is a pawn is worth essentially 1 point value in chess terms, right? It's your lowest value piece. You always get 8 of them on each side. And these are the pieces that are designed to do obstructing, blocking, and trapping your opponents into incorrect moves, right? That's what they're there for. They're low-pointed ships. They don't do a heck of a lot. You really can't usually put a lot of upgrades on them. And I know AMG kind of has made like a little bit of a difference, right? Like they now give us millions of upgrades that we didn't We used to be able to pick and choose. For example, how often did you trade Federation drones? And George, I'll ask you this. When back in 2.0, how often did you outfit trade Federation drones with a bunch of stuff? Outside of grappling struts?
Nope, nothing.
Yeah, they were naked. They were just bare naked. You didn't do anything with them.
Yep.
You took it because I was like, it's a body that's, what were they, 19 points? They were 19 points.
Yeah, there were 19 points.
Out of 200. Yeah. You could put 8 naked things in there and like have points to give your opponent. Anyway, so sorry, I'm detracting. I'm going back to the good old 2.0 days. So anyway, so we go back and we talk about pawns, and pawns are used essentially as a base tool, right? So our base tool is meant to obstruct, to block, to do all those other different things. So now I'm going to kind of turn it over to the boys to say, hey, what are your thoughts like on pawns? Like where do you see the difference? Is there different techniques or different ships that could be considered a pawn that maybe are not just the 2-point fillers like we have up on the screen?
George, I'll let you go first.
I'm probably worse than going to this. Yeah, I'll pass it on to you, sir.
Oh my God,
so yeah, they're absolutely very similar to for like pawns in chess in X-Wing here. Specifically, when we look at the vultures here for the Separatist Alliance, because of their dial, they move very much like a pawn, right? Their best moves are going to be the ones that go straight or doing the hard turns. So when you're thinking about how you're going to move those particular pieces in the board, they're very one-dimensional, I would like to say, in terms of how they move. Because their fragility, their low health that they have on them and low defensive nature, they are not pieces that you typically expect to win one-on-one matches against like some of the bigger ships, because they're very fragile. So they're very good, especially in 2.5, to get objectives or to set up blocks on your opponents for your bigger hitting ships to come in, like your knights pieces or your rook pieces. And I'm using analogies for like the different ships, of course. And that's what they're there to do. They're there to go forward. They're basically your fodder that you're going to send in to try to gum up your enemy's position, try to get objectives while they're at it. And if they happen to take out a better ship than them, then that's great. That's a bonus. But they're mainly there just to go in, try to grab something, gum up, and just try to be a nuisance to try to get in the way.
Yeah, basically, you're okay with losing some. Like it's not the end of the world if you lose a couple of pawns, basically.
Yeah. So now I have a question. So, for example, the Trade Federation drone has no loadout points. So if you're new to the show or you're new to X-Wing, right, the way that the points are built is we have a 20-point structure. And then from our 20-point structure, we have what's called loadout points. And they don't count towards your overall points. And games go to 20, right? And so what happens is as you're building your list, your specific ship and pilot will get a set of loadout points that you're able to build anything you want this on a restricted list. And Trade Federation drones currently now have 0 loadout points. Whereas the Holocron droid, which has an ability, gets 4 points of loadout. And those are all free. So the first question I have, George, right, is if I give the Holocron droid a Discord missile or a cluster missile, which is what I ran today, or if I give it a energy shell, does that change that Holocron drone from a pawn to another ship, or do we still kind of consider that a pawn because it's still a 3 health ship that's kind of like fodder?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it still falls into the pawn category. Yeah, it doesn't change anything for a droid, anyways, a drone.
Okay. Well, like I said, I just wanted to make sure before we went too far, because I think that's, like I said, that's the big thing there, right? Is that we have people we have some drones that get abilities now and have the different things, but really in reality, when we talk about fodder and blocking, an I1 is going to be. How about this I3 Green Squadron Expert? I believe they are they 4 points still?
Yes, they are.
Ugh.
You could be a glorified pawn. I like that word, that terminology, but still a pawn.
Yeah, still a pawn. Yeah.
Yep. So how about that Green Squadron Expert? Do you feel that's a pawn?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that currently right now, they because of the low loadout, not being able to equip like high hitting ordnance. Yeah, sure, you could put like an ion torpedo or sorry, an ion missile onto them to like help give like that status effect onto your enemy. But without that big hit potential, just chipping away with 2 dice, sure, they're hard to take down, but at the same time, in this game with objectives, you can't exactly stay flying away all the time with the RZ2 A-Wings and expect to take out your opponents that have probably bigger guns and can possibly take you out because green dice can fail you at any time and that can pretty much take out your A-Wing at any point. So yeah, I would still consider them a better pawn, but they're still a pawn.
Okay. So they're a pawn that's worth a little bit more, but probably not worth 4 points. They're probably worth 3 points. And ANG just doesn't know how to price things appropriately. How about Merle? However you say Coben.
Yeah. She's a pawn with special powers. I mean, Merle can definitely make bigger like rooks and bishops feel like a pawn when she gets them in the arc. But yeah, definitely really good.
All right. And so before we move on from pawns, the last couple I threw up there was an ISB Jingoist and an Iden, right? And I think if we talk there, I think there's kind of a little bit of a difference here, and that's kind of what I wanted to go through, right? So this Black Squadron Ace here has no special ability. It is an I3, but it's really just out there to die for the most part. Even though it does have 3 agility, it is out there to die. We look at an ISB Jingoist, they bring a little bit more of a caveat. They don't have any charges, but they get 3 loadout points that give them illicit. And then they turn around and can give out anything at range 0 to 1, a strain, or somebody has to remove a green token. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, I would almost make them into like a knight type piece, and my reasoning for that is that they have the potential to affect their opponents, their opponent's stats, right? Either by removing a token or by giving them a strain. And if your opponent ends up taking a strain, it makes a huge difference, especially when you're thinking about like a more ACer ship that has high agility to help them evade a lot of shots. That strain token makes that 2 dice feel a little more powerful. And even if they decide to not take a shot on that, leaving that strain on that particular ship can lead another ship to hit that particular ship a little bit harder in the wake, or at least taking away that token, so that way it could potentially take more damage from a future shot. So for that particular reason, because of its ability, I think it actually goes into like a knight category.
So I will challenge the knight category in a minute, but you're basically saying it moves into a different category, right?
Yes.
So now when we talk about Merle, though, Merle also reduces your dice. Why is Merle not part of that category as well?
Because it is initiative 1, and it is a little more difficult to reliably do that with Merle versus a Jingoist that can either bump and still take that and do take another shot somewhere else. And you're able to essentially get 2 Jingoists for the same price as Merle. So they're doubly effective than Merle could be.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. Now we talk about Iden. Iden allows you to spend a charge to live, essentially. You cancel a full-on attack. So you get 1 extra life. So does that take Iden out of that pawn category? Or do we just leave Iden still in the pawn category?
She's a queen. She's a queen, in my opinion.
All right. We'll put a pin in that one.
I say that she's I will call her a bishop with an asterisk because she's good right now because of her, right? She has the loadout to help equip a cannon, which can help her punch really hard, much better than any TIE fighter, and that's what makes her really, really good. her ability is a very nice bonus as well to help her prevent damage. So yeah, I would probably consider her more of a bishop type than a queen, because the double reposition, I think, is a requirement to be a queen for that. So.
Yep. No, I agree with you on the bishop part. For her, yeah, she's more specialized, so I think definitely falls in that category.
Yes. Okay, so good. So we've kind of defined where that pawn threshold is. It has to be some sort of ability. You want it to be a blocker. I4 is not typically a blocker, so that kind of is why we're ruling ISP Jingoist out of a pawn category. Then you look at your different initial or your different abilities, and the ISP Jingoist offers a special ability that's a little bit over the top, whereas like a Gideon Hass just gets to roll one extra die, right? And that's really doesn't take him out of that pawn category. It just makes him a little bit more valuable of a pawn. Now, let's talk about knights and bishops, because both in the chess world, and I guess I should have explained this earlier, when we talk about value, when I give a value rating, the reason we have value ratings is because when you trade pieces in chess, you want to be able to make sure you're trading over your acquired amount or for a better position. So, for example, you would never trade a queen, which is a value of 9 in chess, for a pawn unless you knew within 2 moves you have checkmate on your opponent. You would never do that. You just would not want to do that. Which I don't know if they actually have any maneuvers in chess where you give up your queen to get checkmate. I don't know. So I don't think that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's possible.
It's probably possible, but I've never seen that in a theory. So there you go. Maybe that should be your homework for today, is to find that stupid chess. Where we give up the queen? It's not called Queen's Gambit. All right. Anyway, so the idea behind knights and bishops, and we're going to talk about both of them, I think, at the same time, because they both fit into that 3-point value in a chess, but they both do different things. So a knight is considered a minor piece on the board and has unique movements, allowing them to capture and churn the tide in some sort of a game without being missed if you lose them, right? Or exchange them. They also function as somewhat of a blocker a little bit. So they're a little bit more of a blocker than they are, than they can be. So for example, because they have weird movements, they do L-shaped movements all across the board. It gives them an ability to get in places that are less scripted, I guess is the nicest way to say it, over other pieces, right? They're usually the most forgot about piece in chess when it comes to what maneuver they can do. And they can be highly, highly dangerous. On the other hand, a bishop is considered a minor piece as well, right? Because it is worth 3 points, but they're different than knights. Bishops move as a patrol piece. They're there to screen, which is a little bit different than obstructing. They're there to help keep other players in check for different abilities, right? And they can provide incredible spike damage, and that's an X-Wing term, but they can provide incredible damage output to make a player miserable if they miscalculate. The knight is usually that secret where somebody forgets something based on his movement, whereas a bishop, you know how the bishop moves, you really shouldn't miss a bishop. you shouldn't miss it when a bishop is there, but if you do, the bishop's going to come in and it's going to punish you. They're predictable, but they can be more formidable because of how they move and how far they can move on a board. So for those who don't know how to play chess, a bishop moves on a diagonal. You get 2 of them. They go on each different color, and they essentially can cover the whole board. Now, let's go back, and this is where, when we talked about Iden, right, we said Iden is a more of a bishop piece, right? Yes, and I would agree with that, because she's used as a screen. She can hit you really hard when she wants to, and she doesn't like to die when you want her to die. Or she tells another ship they're not going to die when you want them to die either. Whereas, who did you call out for a knight?
The Jingoist.
Whereas you say a Jingoist is a knight. I feel a Jingoist is a bishop. I'll give my reasoning here in a second, and then we can talk about what knights are. You can rebut me, whatever floats your boat. But a Jingoist, just because of their ability, you know it's coming. You know if you get in range 0 to 1, you know what's going to happen. You know that they're going to screen you. They have predictable movements. They are not double repositioning ships. Therefore, to me, they're more of a bishop because they're more maybe a control bishop. They're there to control where you're going to go on the board because, again, if I move my pawn here, you're going to come up and get it here. I guess I should bring a chessboard up, but you're going to move a pawn here. You're going to bring a bishop up, and it's going to obliterate that pawn if there's nothing else there to get that bishop. So that's why, to me, a jingoist fits more into the bishop category than the knight category.
Well, I mean, the other I think about is that when you boil down the concept of a knight, right? It's most effective is when it's attacking indirectly, right? Because it does that L shape, right? The jingoist has that same ability, right? Because it's able to still provide a string to a single target, effective at range 0, and still attack a different target. And the original target that received that string or had the token removed has now suffered can now potentially suffer the effects from another ship that's going to come in. So if that jingoist wasn't there to remove or restrain, then there's a higher probability that that particular ship that would have received that either one of those conditions would have a higher chance of surviving an attack from a different ship. So it does provide more of a benefit. Yes, you can use the jingoist ability and still attack that very same ship. Very useful at range 1, but at range 0, I think that's where it fits more of that knight role. And in the current meta, where you do get that clash in the center when you're contesting objectives between different ships, I feel that it does fit that role more than a bishop would because of that.
I guess the issue I have with that is that they are predictable. You know what they're going to do. If you're the one that puts yourself in that way, you're getting what you expect.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about knights then a second. What would you consider a knight?
A knight, probably ships that can affect other ships indirectly, right? And a Commandant Goron on the Empire and the TIE Interceptor, just being able to remove a red token for one of its friendlies and provided a green token, an evade, is very, very strong. If I'm not mistaken, you could do you can remove like an enemy target lock and still give it that, or you remove a stress and do that. And I think that's something that's very much of a knight type move, because knights are also used to protect other pieces in chess. So it's I think that would qualify for like a knight type character.
George, what do you think a knight is? Like, what do you feel?
Well, I need to brush up on my chess knowledge, but to me, I think in the way that I would use a knight would probably be something. Your approach is a little bit more indirect. So if I think of a knight, I'm thinking more of like something that's coming towards you from your flank, perhaps. Maybe like something like an interceptor. I think falls more in the category of a knight.
Yeah. All right, so in my world, like, to me, the knight is going to be something that can reposition, right? It's going to be something that is maybe not reposition, but is going to be more volatile-ish, such as like an HMP droid, right? Drone. You get an HMP can sideslip every other turn, no matter what. An HMP has weird upgrades that allows it to be defensive, allows it to be a neutral piece on the board that doesn't let other things die, because it has attack relay on most of them. Or it could be offensive with multi-missile pods, not really. But it could be offensive with SIG laser cannons or any sort of other missiles. And its ability lets you reroll based on how many target locks are on those things. So to me, the knight is going to be that weird position that's a protectorate. So I think Commander Goron kind of fits that. I think Nash Rinwider fits that very well. It's a protectorate piece where it's sitting there. Usually you don't put those in harm's way to say, here, kill this thing, because you put Nash or Goron in the way, they will die. They're typically at the back of the squads or off to the side. I also see Braylon as a knight. And I say that because Braylon, the way those things work is a lot of BS, in my opinion. But A B-wing has the ability to be a knight because a B-wing has some very unique maneuvers, right? They have 2 talons, 1 Ks. What are the other turnaround maneuver? Those are the only 2, right? That they have.
Yeah, the 1 talon, the 2 Ks. Yeah.
Yep. And so they have those, but a lot of their abilities have to do with using stress. They're very low agility, so you can take them off the board pretty easily, but they have like a decent amount of health. I mean, 8 health is nothing to shy away from. You aren't going to one-shot a B-wing unless you somehow can shattering shot, trick shot that thing and get a crit chain going. Other than that, you're not killing a B-wing with one hit, you know. But they do die pretty easily. I see Braylon is because when Braylon defends or performs an attack, if you're stressed, you get to reroll dice. You know, they are maneuverable, so they have the ability to kind of do sideways maneuvers as needed. They have loadout points where you could put afterburners on them, which JJ was very fond of for a long time. That was his favorite thing, other than throwing bombs, which he's a dirty cheater for doing, or a coward. That's what Greg calls you, is a coward.
Hey, I got it. Community. I did it.
You did not. So there you go. So that's kind of how I see knights. So now if we want to talk, let's talk about other ships, right? And then how they fit into that. So let's go ahead and we're going to clear off the Geonosian. We're going to clear off Nash and Braylon. So I brought Slider up, and the Slider essentially is the same. Every other churn it can do is side sloop. But that's it. Other than that, Slider really isn't that piece. Like, really, when you think about Z95s, most of the time they are pawns, in my opinion.
Yeah. Agreed.
But this C95, I feel, could possibly fit in a crappily we'll call it a bad night, right? Like, it's a night to some extent.
Night. Yes.
But it's just not the best night that you could have. But in that faction that has no such thing as side slipping, how often are people going to forget that thing can move to the side? I know I did at least 3 times against Sean.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it can happen a few times, yeah.
Yeah. Now we have Sarisu, right? Sarisu says, while a friendly ship at 0 to 1 defends, it may reroll one of its defense dice. Do you consider Sarisu, George, a knight or a bishop? Or does it not fit in any of those categories?
I would probably consider it a knight. Yeah.
Because it provides the defensive rerolls? Yep. And it has the potential output to destroy you, but it's not a gatekeeper. You're not screening with it, typically. It is meant as it is a piece that dies pretty easily, so, like, if we're being honest.
I actually would consider Sarisu a rook. And the main reason why is that typically in chess, one of the most common moves is a castle maneuver, right? Where you can move over your king 2 spaces and then your rook over it, so that way you essentially protect it from the sides at an angle, right? And the rook is there essentially to protect your critical piece, which is your king in chess. Sarisu kind of fits that bill here because its ability to provide the defensive rerolls to everybody that's at range 1 of it. So if you have a critical piece that you need to survive, having that reroll on defense helps keep that important piece alive. So that way you're able to last a little bit longer and potentially kill other ships. So I feel because of the defensive benefit and also having the ability to reach long distance with a proton torpedo, or you can even equip it with a HLC if you feel more comfortable with that, and have that big explosive attack. The rook can threaten from across the board in chess, and I think that the identity for Sarisu are like a rook piece in chess.
So really, when we get into rook definitions, I define the rook as kind of the cousin to more of the bishop, to be honest with you, than a knight, right?
Okay.
So I guess we'll put a pin in Sarisu a minute. Jesus Christ. We're going to put a pin in Sarisu, and we're going to come back to Sarisu, because I don't agree with you that it's a rook. But we'll come back once we get the rook definition. What other ships do you feel are knights or bishops?
Another knight card I would say would be Hera Syndulla in both iterations, either the B wing or the A wing, just being able to move on initiatives. Most of the board has already moved, and being able to provide those tokens to your other ships while she's able to attack as well at higher initiative. I think that she would fit the Rook category.
All right. What else? What else comes to mind, George?
As far as a knight goes, I was actually trying to think of like less common factions here, but yeah, it's not working.
All right, how about
Knight.
Cullaby? Does Cullaby fit that knight? It's tanky. It can move in different ways. It has the ability to perform the barrel roll or boost action, right? And then you get to flip your other upgrade card, right?
Yeah.
It is typically not Cullaby is not used as a screening X-wing. It is more of a I'm going to come in as kind of a special character piece inside of here. And I do think when we talk about rooks and bishops, I think in fairness, there you go, Nabi. I agree with you. When we talk about rooks and bishops, we talk about a lot of what we have in X-wing, right? Like X-wing is filled with rooks and bishops, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that not very lightly, but if we were to go into, let's pick what about First Order, right? We have Ember. Ember to me is more of a bishop. Ember is a long range attacker, going to keep you in check. When it gets really close, it's probably going to pop, but it's going to be worthwhile trading, right? A wings, and we could talk about A wings, and then we're going to say not ZZ.
What about a fireball?
A fireball? Which one? How about Kaz?
Yeah,
Kaz? Yeah. Let's do Kaz. Kaz, in my opinion, is a bishop. I see Kaz as a bishop. And I say that because Kaz gets the extra dice when needed, if it's not damaged. Once you start taking damage and going after them, then Kaz would specifically start to kind of fall apart, right? Like Kaz loses its ability. But at that point, hopefully you've traded enough points, right, for Kaz. If we're talking about Jaeger, I don't know. Jaeger's probably a bishop. What's the cheap one? What's the cheap one that nobody wants to run?
Bucket. R1J5.
Yeah, the bucket droid. That's a pawn. that's a pawn.
Yeah.
It's an expensive pawn, but it's a pawn. You know. And so now how about, and we haven't talked about Finn. We actually haven't talked about Republic at all, too. Let's talk about Finn a minute. Because this one will probably stimulate some discussion points. And then I'll bring up some stuff from more from First Order and more from Republic here. Finn, with its current loadout, would you consider a knight or a bishop?
I would consider him a knight because, number one, he can't move as fast like a bishop should be able to. And his ability does make him fairly defensive as well, and he can do some pretty good damage as well consistently. I think because of his ability, he's definitely higher than what a pawn would be. So I would put him as a knight.
All right. George, what's your thoughts? You look like you're going to disagree here.
Yeah, I think I disagree. I think a more specialized. I think a bishop falls in that category more. Really, it's just I think maybe the cost and the initiative that bumps him down to a bishop, because I don't know about you, I tend to prioritize knights over bishops, I think.
I would probably agree. Do they not have Ahsoka in here? I cannot find Ahsoka in this thing.
In what, Republic or Rebels?
In Republic. Ahsoka doesn't fly in Rebels. Oh, I guess she does. She does. I'm trying. Thank you. I could not get that to come up for a reason on my screen. So here we have Ahsoka, right? Ahsoka, are you going to consider Ahsoka a knight or a bishop, George?
Off the bat, I would still say bishop for Ahsoka, but man, That's a hard one. Yes, I think bishop still.
And I would agree with you.
Definitely
Yes,
consider her
Bubba.
bishop. Yeah.
So I agree with that. It's more of a bishop, even though it does have something that supports it. Now, if we put her in an A-wing, though, do you still consider her a bishop? Or does she even transcend past the bishop and the knight category?
That's toughy. I mean, she does have a lot better loadout value and a higher initiative in the A-wing. Um, I think she transcends. I think she does, because she has the ability to push in damage with her with the ordnance, and she also is able to coordinate other ships. I think this actually might be, I don't know. Dare I say a
A queen?
All right. I will 1,000,000% disagree with that. She's
Whoa.
definitely not a queen.
I would at least bump her up to a knight as an A-wing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in an A-wing, I would almost consider her a rook. So I think we could put a pin in
That too,
hers
yeah.
and come back to that, because I think the I-5 plus the loadout value makes her that. I think if you kill her loadout value, she becomes a rook. Then she becomes this high initiative base piece. But with her current loadout, I think she could be easily fit into that rook. But we're gonna get to rook in just a minute. I promise. I'm trying to make sure we cover as many ships as we can, because I feel that it's important, right? So remember, so JJ's job is to remember Ahsoka, A-wing, and Sarisu. How about Hound? Where does Hound fit this? Is it considered a pawn? Is that what this is? Do we have a pawn that they've given us for 5 points and 1,000,000 loadout?
Ooh, that's tough. Oh man.
Crappy dial, but amazing mechanic. It's the best support piece you're gonna have.
I mean,
in
offensively, unless you equip it with like barrage rockets to like boost its attack, and I mean that's really putting a lot of points to just boost it by 1 die. His value definitely comes from the support piece. I say it's a I think bishop is probably the right call.
George?
It's a glorified pawn to me. It's going to go down quick. That thing's not going to stick around too long, in my opinion.
So I agree with you actually on that one. I would almost consider it 2 pawns in one somehow.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that a little bit for a second, because I think that brings up an interesting point. And remember, at the beginning of this whole segment, what did I say? I said, hey, maybe we have a new category that doesn't belong in chess, right? Like, do we have a specialized type of category that chess does not have because they don't have a piece for it? I'm not sold on that point yet, but hear me out. You have a ship, though. When you pair it with other ships, does it change what it is? So, for example, take Hound and put him with a bunch of V-wings, right? It does okay. You put 7 Fleet Gunner on, you get a one little bit of initiative more. But when you put it with Jedis, right? When you put them with Jedis that can eliminate something in 1 turn or 2 turns, you've created an extremely powerful piece. So what if we said Hound is designated a pawn, but based on the support pieces that go with it, moves him into that knight category?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's fair.
All right.
I don't
So we
disagree.
still don't have a new category yet. Damn it. All right.
No.
We just have a translucent Hound. Was what we have, or what do they call those? Is a shape changer. Hound's a shape changer, and I would consider all lats to typically be shape changers. Then at that point, all right. What about Rush? Rush has a pretty bloody amazing ability, but you got to get damage to use it. Bishop, Knight, something different.
Gosh, that's tough. Its ability does make it very, very good. I think it's a bad bishop that goes into a good bishop, honestly, or like a really good pawn that turns into a bishop. It's good when it gets damaged, and that's kind of its issue, right? Is that you have to sacrifice basically half of its health in order for it to become I6, and then it becomes a very fragile I6 ship. It can still do some work, obviously, because having Initiative 6 is really good, but I don't think it transcends anything higher than a bishop.
Fair enough. All right. Last one I brought up is Cad Bane, because Cad Bane also presents a very interesting, unique piece, both in Separatist and in Scum. So where do we feel Cad falls? George, your thoughts?
There you go. I think Cad actually falls within the Knight category because of its ability to have all different types of loadouts between bombs or missiles, and which supplements its attack prowess, its ability, native ability to either pass on a token over to another ship, affecting it indirectly, which is right on cue for a Knight, or taking an action after the fact. Again, being very movable. I think that it's a solid Knight.
I'm torn. I think leaning more towards Knight, but also considering it a Rook, depending on the loadout.
Oh. All right. Yeah. See, now you're speaking a little bit more my language. So let's talk about Rooks now. Let's talk about Rooks. Rooks are the first major piece that you have on your chessboard, right? A Rook is different than a Knight. It's essentially what I would call a beefier cousin to the Bishop. They move in different ways, similar to bishops, so they're still somewhat predictable. They're not an unpredictable piece yet, but they're not meant to patrol like a bishop is. So a bishop is meant to patrol to kind of keep you in check. A knight is meant to kind of be spontaneous, a blocker, provide support, right? A rook is the guy that sits in the background and says, if you come at me, I'm going to punish you. I will 1,000,000% punish you as hard as I can. Right? And it's going to take advantage of the other pieces clearing out space so it can move. It is also, they are designed to come in, right, and help an opponent when it needs it, only to be traded if a more powerful piece, such as a queen, is available to take. Or multiple different pawns, rooks, or pawns, bishops, and knights. So if you could trade a knight for multiple pieces, you're in good shape, right? Rooks will come in. They're going to take and leave their opponent with less of an advantage. They're going to come in and do what is necessary, but only when it is needed. Rooks are part of the endgame piece to some extent, and if they are left to the very last, they will definitely take advantage of you and move your ship to the endgame. So let's roll back to Cad for a second. Cad, Rush is playing checkers. You're killing me with your comments here. I'm very distracted right now. Cad, I feel, fits into the rook category, and I agree that it could have different loadout, but I feel a lot of the other loadouts are very unsuperior to some extent to what Cad is built to do. Not saying it's wrong if you build it with just bombs. As a coordinator, or you're building it with just like tractor beams and ion cannons and ion bombs to stop things. Not saying that those are wrong, but I feel that Cad has a specific value when it brings it into a squad, and I feel the rook piece of it is where it's at. And I guess when we go back to, let's say, an ion cannon, for example, or ion bombs, which is the way Crispy loves to run them, you're using Cad as a control piece, which we don't have in chess control pieces 100% there, because you're trading one for one the majority of the time. Whereas we have, that's the difference between that and X-Wing. We have things that we use as a control style or control method for the game. I believe Cad is a rook, because, especially in Scum, because of the denying of tokens, the fact that you can pass off your negative tokens, and the fact that you can either hit hard or control an opponent to allow the other pieces to attack it. Thoughts?
I think
I
you hit
think
it
it
right on the
is.
nail. To be honest, I think
Yeah,
that's how he was intended to be played. Yeah.
yeah. I definitely agree with you. I think that the loadout definitely, his availability of different options at the loadout value definitely allow him to play that role a lot better. And with the definition of the rook, so yeah, I do have to agree. Yeah.
Now that we have that piece, right? Now that we understand kind of, we talked a little bit about what a rook, what a rook is. And no, we haven't talked about Rook the Gauntlet. I mean, we should probably do that though, because we should probably know where the gauntlets sit in this. But let's talk about Sarisu again and Ahsoka, right? So now that we've defined Rook and we've actually defined that piece on the board and how it interacts, JJ, do you still feel Sarisu is a Rook?
She's a weaker rook, but yes, still a rook.
All right, I'm going to disagree with that hardcore, but that's okay. How about Ahsoka? Do we feel Ahsoka's a Rook? George?
Ahsoka A-wing.
Yes, A-wing. Only the A-wing version.
Only the A-wing. Oh, decisions here. Man, I'm gonna say yes on this one.
All right. All right. So we still feel that Ahsoka's a Rook. Okay. And I will tell you, I feel Ahsoka fits into the Rook role better than Sarisu does. And JJ, I apologize, but I just don't feel the Sarisu is a Rook, because Sarisu, I've watched Sarisu die in one shot, just done and gone, even with rerolls. I've actually made Sarisu die in one shot last week, without the rerolls. So and so I agree that it could, that the style of it, but I don't feel with its health value that it allows it to be that Rook piece that we're looking for because of the dial.
And like, I don't know, it's just a feeling towards me, like the way that I feel also, because feeling does come into it too, right? Like you feel better having Ahsoka later towards the game than you would if you had Sirisu, in my opinion. Like that's just how I would feel about the
Okay.
game. So I think,
And that's true. And I do think Ahsoka is kind of a borderline Rook as well. Like I would consider her a bishop more or less, but depending on your play style and depending on how you move and use Ahsoka, could depend on her being a Rook. And I say that because I played a guy that plays Han, one of the VCXs. I can't remember the name of it now. The trader guy, whatever the trader guy's name is from Rebels. What's that guy's name? It's not Vizier. It's a trader. Callus.
Callus.
Yep. Callus, Han, and Ahsoka. Like a 3-ship list like that. And like in that list, Ahsoka is definitely more of a Rook than anything else. So, all right. What else? What other Rooks do we have? What other things fall into that Rook category?
Well, I think the gauntlets actually fit that role because they have the ability to carry different crew, that increases their efficiency for that, and late game that large health on those big gauntlets can do a lot of work, and do a lot of damage. So yeah, I would say that the gauntlet itself will probably be under that category.
Do you feel the gauntlet is a Rook no matter what pilot it is, or do different pilots fit into different categories?
I mean, barring the generics, yeah, I think so. I think across the board, I can't really think of like a deviation on the pilot, but I'll probably have to check the list of different pilots there. But I think that across the board, yes.
I think so too. Just because of they're just gonna stay on the board for quite a bit. It does feel bad losing them because of their costs, but yeah, that's, I think all around, all across the board, I think they're the Rooks.
All right, cool. What about Eamon Azamine? Rook, Bishop, Knight? Where do you feel Eamon falls in here?
Assuming that you're bringing Emon for the bombs and not just to have an I4 fire spray, he falls within the knight category, because his main objective in the game is to try to hit you with as many bombs as possible, and his ability does help facilitate that. So I think that's probably the correct role for Emon.
All right. George?
I would say bishop for Emon.
Ooh,
He's very specialized. I think Emon can cause havoc. His approach is pretty straightforward. You kind of know what he's going to do. So yeah.
Gatekeeper. So would you also consider baby Boba, or whatever we want to call young Boba, young man Boba, a bishop as well, and not fit into that rook category?
Yeah, I mean, his ability, you have to get his ability to work very, very reliably, and even then, I don't think that it will push him into the rook category. I think that he fits more as a knight.
All right. How about Chewbacca in the YT 1300? We've seen Chewbacca just show up randomly.
Are we talking about Rebel or Resistance?
Resistance. Sorry.
Yes, as a rook, yes. The Resistance Chewie, I absolutely think that is a rook. Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah.
Yep. And I think the ability piece of it is kind of what pushes that into there because of what it can do. How about Leia in Rebels?
Yeah, definitely a rook. Her ability with the Force, being able to take on other Force users, being able to provide actions on a red turn or on a red maneuver for your other ships. Definitely a really good late game piece. And at Initiative 5, she's going to be doing quite a lot of work. So yeah.
All right. How about Covenel?
Same.
That's an interesting one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love Kova.
Because Kova can be both,
Yeah.
right? Because Kova fits into aggressive attacking as well as a coordinator.
I think more of a bishop because it's more attack oriented, rolling extra dice. But yeah, you're right. The coordinate ability is just it's really good. But I think you bring Nova as a solid like third ship to help attack and also do that coordinating, which can be more offensive minded. So I think it fits more into a bishop role than the rook.
Fair enough. How about Mace Windu? These are the last two we'll do, and then we're going to move on to Queen.
Bishop, I think. More offensive minded, I would say. Knight fighter.
Yeah.
All right. How about Von Reg?
Probably a bishop as well.
See, I disagree with that one. I think I see Von Reg as a rook.
A rook?
Yes. With health, though, I mean, Von Reg with a single Pro Torp.
You're right, but if your Von Reg's taking a Pro Torp, you probably have a problem.
Yeah, that's a strike with no shaft.
Oh my god. I don't know.
Oh man.
I see it because of his ability, right? You get to transfer a token. He has double reposition. He's not quite a queen, in my opinion. We'll get to queen in a second. I think that kind of leads us into the queen discussion. He has the fine-tooth thrusters, which make him so much more able to do it. And then he has the loadout points, in extended to take a hull and a shield upgrade. in standard, it does
crazy.
not. So I see him as a rook because he hits hard. He's an end game piece, and he's one that will close it out for you. Which now kind of leads us into queens. And JJ, if you want to start queuing up some people you think are queens, then we can argue about those, which is fun. To me, the queen is the quintessential piece that everybody knows in chess. It is your second major piece on the board, right? It is probably the second most valuable piece that you'll have, and you cannot sacrifice it without... Just wait, Nabi, we'll get to kings. You cannot sacrifice it without without taking other valuable pieces along with it. Otherwise, you could lose the game. This piece is so valuable, it has the ability to maneuver around the board and basically like every other piece but a knight. It can move any which way. You can trade it, obviously, with value and strategy, but without this piece, the player will have a less of an advantage and your opponent will have higher of an advantage to win. This piece is extremely versatile and can be used in many different situations. Now, I'm going to go ahead and define king a minute, and then I think we're going to come back to the queen king thing, because I think, especially based on what Navi is saying, there could be some discrepancy between what we see as kings and queens. A king is obviously the most important piece on the board. If you lose this piece, the match is over, right? In chess, game is immediately over. It doesn't contribute a lot. It just sits there as a tank for the whole game. This piece is considered to be one that you would keep alive to the end game, obviously to win. Now, I feel in X-Wing, our kings are a little bit different, right? Because you don't automatically lose a game per se if it's over, but your probability should be over 90%. We'll just call it 90%. If it's over 90%, you're going to lose. If you lose this piece, it becomes a king. I will also say the big difference between a king and like X-Wing is the maneuverability piece. We need to take that out of it, because kings in chess move one space. That's it. Except for when you castle. When you castle, it's different. And in reality, there would technically be 0 kings, because there's almost nothing that moves one space and is the most valuable thing in the world in X-Wing. But so for
Fenrir shuttle.
Fenrir shuttle. All right. No, I disagree with you, but okay. That's to some extent a pretty good example though, right? Because you have something that if it does lose the game, you don't lose the game though. In a what do we have? Fen, Cullaby, Wedge, Luke game. Your king does. If you lose Fen, it doesn't matter. You have the other 3 X-Wings that will destroy the shit out of you. So essentially, a king is what you want to protect over your queen, right? But the queen is going to be more versatile. So does everybody agree or feel that that is a proper analogy to both of those?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Now, let's talk about Boba Fett and Scum, because this one will probably merit the most discussion out of all the pilots you have up there, maybe other than Vader. This is going to merit the most discussion on whether Boba is a queen or a king. George, you go first.
Boba's king, in my opinion. You lose Boba, you're done. Might as well just forfeit the game.
All right. JJ?
I disagree. I think it depends highly on the list, because yes, he has 9 points, right? However, that does leave a lot of room open for another big ship that can go in and be as effective as Boba and helping either control objectives or to hunt down other ships. I mean, you look at half of the gauntlets; they're very, very good there. Dengar, also another really great piece. I think Dengar probably fits the king piece more than Boba because of his effectiveness in offense. Boba, while is really great at punching in, being at range 0 has an inherent risk of damaging itself, being susceptible to having all those range 1 shots.
And we lose JJ again.
Oh no.
Yep, there you go. It's in his nature to get those range 1 shots and try to use his ability as much as possible to like get those shots in there. So I think that because of that makes Boba more of a queen than a king in that case.
All right. So I'm going to agree with both of you, and I think Nabi says it best. Boba plus second fire spray. When one dies, when both are queens, when one dies, the other becomes king. And I think with Boba Fett, I would actually say that is very true. So then we can move on to Wedge. I would argue Wedge is a Rook. So, like, I actually don't believe Wedge is.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
believe
know.
Wedge
So
is a queen.
so here's my defense of Wedge as a queen, right?
All right.
If you see a Wedge across the board, you're immediately planning everything and trying to take out Wedge, right? Because if you don't, just like a queen, Wedge can strike and take out any of your ships, right? Because his ability, especially with a proton torpedo coming away from it, is going to be good. Wedge can then fly away if he needs to, disengage and make you chase it, and it's because the queen is probably the most valuable piece on the board. I think Wedge does fit that ability. Granted, he's not as versatile as like a Boba Fett in terms of defense or getting a reliable boost all the time as an action. But I think that his ability, his presence on the board, if you're facing off a rebel list that has Wedge, Wedge is going to be a priority because you may not have enough time for your ships to survive to turn your attention to him later on in the game. And if he's an end game piece left on the board against your ships, you're in trouble because he is very capable out the rest of your list if you leave him to the end.
Rooks are part of the end game as well, and if left last, they will allow you to have more advantage in the end game than your opponent.
I don't know.
That's what I wrote. That's what it came from.
It's a very high tier Rook for sure. I don't think he loses you the game if you do end up losing like Wedge. So I don't think he's high enough to be a queen in my book.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Vader is the king. I don't care what point cost he's at. I think Vader is a king. I'm sorry. Like, if you lose Vader, you pretty much lose the king game.
I actually meant to put TIE Advance Vader instead of Defender Vader.
Okay.
I do agree that Defender Vader is a king. Yeah,
TIE Advance Vader, I will agree with you as a queen.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a great ship painting idea. Who wants to make my Vader Defender look like a queen? Seriously. who wants to commission this shit? I have like I have 2 specially painted Vaders, but I would take a third Vader X1. I have like 5 of them. So I will take another one painted as a queen. So if anybody wants to hit me up later, let's discuss painting Vader as a queen. Ooh. All right.
That would be great.
So Defender Vader is a king. We could just move on from that. Anakin is unique, right? Because does Anakin fit into the king category, or is it more of a queen category?
When you compare it across the other factions, I think it's a queen. You're not going to lose the game if you lose Anakin. The Republic has a lot of other ships that can put out a lot of damage in addition to what Anakin does. Yes, he is probably the better out of all those ships, but if you lose Anakin, you're not losing the game. So for that, I think that Anakin is a queen.
George?
I tend to agree. You're always looking out for where the queen is and what the opponent can do with the queen, and I think Anakin falls in that category. So for sure, yeah, definitely a queen.
All right. What about Poe? I think I feel Poe's a queen. I guess no matter which one it is, I feel Poe's always a queen.
Yeah, agreed. Both versions are queens. Yes.
How about Jango Fett? That's an interesting dilemma too, because technically there's enough in Separatists. If you lose Jango, you could still win. But that's a hard one.
I think George is probably more qualified for this, judging on your list. What do you think, George?
Man, I would still say that if I end up losing, that it also depends on when I lose Jango. Losing him late game, done. He's a king. I think once I lose him, he's gone. I can't come back from that. It just depends when I lose him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that if you're making it either into a 3-ship list, right, like 2 fire, something else, he's definitely a king. Same thing if you're filling it out with a bunch of droids, it's still your heaviest hitter. Yeah, I definitely have to agree that I think Jango is the king. Yeah.
How about Kylo Ren?
Mm,
I think in both fields
because of
he
his
fits queen.
because of his points cost. Well, yeah, I think he's still queen either way. I mean, because it's 7 points versus 6 points on either side.
The
You
question though
still have
is,
a lot of other options.
can you build enough around him to do enough damage? If you lose Kylo, you win. That's the key.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, it does heavily depend on what pilots are going around him to help support him, because you can set him up as a queen piece, or you can set him up as a king piece as well, just depending on what other ships are in that list. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's highly dependent on that. Yeah.
George, what about ZZ? We're gonna give it to you so you could piss Nobby off. Where do you feel ZZ falls into this one?
Oh, we got a big fan of ZZ here. ZZ, I'm gonna have to go Rook on this one.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
no, that's too high
Wow.
praise. I still
Oof.
think he's a bishop.
No,
You shoot one
what?
procket. You shoot one
No.
procket, and that's it.
Nope.
You're done.
All right. So I'm gonna give my defensive ZZ as a queen. I feel ZZ's a queen. Period. I believe the ability makes ZZ a queen, and unless you fly ZZ like shit, ZZ never dies, ever. I would consider Rook to some extent, just because of what it is, but because of ZZ's maneuverability, personally, and the ability to upgrade a lot of these things. Yes, you're right. A procket means nothing, but have you ever tried cluster missiles on ZZ? Has anybody ever actually done that? Has anybody ever actually taken ZZ and done anything other than prockets? Well, I know somebody that has. But I feel I'm gonna go with ZZ as a queen. Even if it's a low ranking queen, that's kind of what I feel with. I would accept Rook as an answer for 200 points as well. But how about Ray then? Let's classify Ray. You feel ZZ's a bishop. What about Ray?
What's race points right now? 7 or 8?
8.
8.
You can still fit a bunch of Y wings on there.
I would definitely categorize her more in the queen category, because often enough, I guess Django can also fall in this, but yeah, you're pairing her up with another strong ship like Poe or something like that. So I think, yeah, she's a queen.
Yeah, I have to agree.
What about Grievous, baby? What is Grievous?
Get back in the night category. Come on.
Oh,
No.
all right. Hold on.
No.
All right,
He's a
we're muting
Rook.
JJ. We just muted JJ. Don't worry. He can't
He's
talk
a
at all for the
Rook.
rest of the podcast.
Yeah.
George, where do you feel Grievous fits in at?
Confidently can say he's a Rook. 100%.
All right. So what would move him out of up to the queen category then?
If he had maybe a higher pilot skill, obviously that would bump him up in points, but I think higher pilot skill would definitely consider him a queen.
All right, JJ, where do you feel Grievous comes in at?
Definitely a Rook. In order for it to be a queen, it has to have more.
Yes, and not breeze up on us. All right, last one we have is Luke, and I kind of started the show off saying Luke was a queen, in my opinion. While JJ reboots, George, your thoughts on Luke?
Yeah, I would agree. It hurts to lose Luke, just like it would a queen. Yeah, that's my opinion. I think his ability is too strong. You don't want to lose him at all. He's hard to kill, but yeah, his point cost is what bumps him up to a queen. Otherwise, I would put him as a Rook, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think we can agree most of the X-wing pilots would be considered Rooks.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's kind of where they fit into. I think ZZ, like I said, ZZ on the other hand, or not Z, well, ZZ, yes, but Luke on the other hand has that ability that is just so prevalent. Like you can lose him. It's not the end of the world if you do, but you really better trade him for something good. Otherwise, you're going to regret that. And if you lose both Wedge and Luke at the same time, you're just screwed.